I mean, we've been doing retreats for the past 4.5 years for straight men. We're starting our first retreat for gay men, first cohort of gay men in a couple months, and then we're doing our first cohort of women a couple months after that, and then next year we're going to do our first cohort of all combat veterans. We have it's basically a 6 year, sorry, 6 year, a 6 week arc. We do 3 weeks of preparation. We have our retreat in the middle, and then we do 4 weeks of integration post. And then what separates our retreat from any other retreat actually that I've ever heard of is that we have a system and a program to keep people in communication with not only the guides and the facilitators from the retreat, but the entire community. So we have a community right now of over 50 guys that have been to our retreats, some of them multiple times, and we're in communication. We have like meetings and meetups, breakfasts, and all kinds of things, and we're expanding that community. It's the name of the retreat is Men of Integrity, and we're under a 501c3 organization called Universal Awareness Fellowship. And there's other programs that don't involve expanded states in there. And our intention is to really make people help people be their best self, both in terms of their actions in the world, like how they go out forth into the world and do good work for others in service of others, and also allowing them to connect with their authenticity. So that in our culture, we're very fearful of expressing ourselves via however that may be, any kind of expression of creativity, whether it be dance, art, vocal expression, singing, music, in addition to creative endeavors that we might not even recognize as creative. Some of our jobs require a creative aspect of our internal self or of our being, and to really recognize that and allow it to be forward facing so that we can be our individual selves in a world and add that palette of different perspectives to the world. So,
Thank
and
you.
I also, one more thing. I also do one-on-ones with people. Sorry, work with people one-on-one. Expanded states. It's kind of I call myself a guide. It's kind of the intersection between coaching and therapy. I'm not a therapist, but so therapy kind of works on the past to make sense. So that's definitely a big component. And coaching sort of works on the future and where you go. I think a guide really sits in the middle. It's kind of like integrating the whole package and supporting people where they are in the moment.
Thank you for sharing that. You just came back from a retreat for expanded states. How was that, and what does expanded states mean?
Well, the retreat was absolutely incredible. I mean, from my perspective and the feedback we got from the folks that were there, it was really transformative. Um, Expanded states is basically any state of being that is kind of expands your consciousness and reframes your perspective, so that you can see alternative perspectives. That's how I'm going to define it right now. Um, we go through the world sort of with blinders on, our own perspective, our own thoughts, our own emotions, and we're looking at the world through this perceptual apparatus of our senses, and we're bound by our core beliefs. We're bound by our preconceptions, our assumptions that we have, and when and we can use expanded states, whether they be through breath work, whether they be, these are all examples of expanded states: breath work, psychedelics, meditation. These are all avenues that can bring you kind of outside of that blinders frame of reference and give you an opportunity to see your life, your way, your 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 experience in the world from a different lens or from a different perspective. It broadens, it expands your experience, and you're like, oh, okay. Um, I was this way with my partner, and this is an example, and I'm holding fast to the way of being that I am because I can only see it through my perspective. And oftentimes, like if you're working on your relationship, for example, through the expanded state, you'll be like, recognize, oh, I understand what she meant when she was saying this, or I can see now kind of like her perspective. And now, oh, with this new frame of reference, this new deeper understanding of how maybe this my partner or friends or coworkers or whatever are looking at the same perspective, and now I understand this perspective. Now I can engage them in a different way. Understanding, it's kind of like bringing empathy to the world, to everything around you. So you're kind of understanding from that frame of reference. Now, given this new understanding, now I can behave differently in the world and ideally be more effective.
And I think that's well needed because there's times where I look at men and women relationships and they just seem like they're out of alignment, right? When it comes to being in that relationship together. But I think many times we forget that we have to be within alignment within ourselves. You mentioned that it's you're working with men and men were this treat, and then you also mentioned there's going to be for gay men and so on. When it comes to the men population, how can we help them be better aligned with themselves so they can be better aligned in their relationships?
Well, I think men need permission to express themselves. All right. So I think of I think of every being, every aspect of nature having, two archetypes. Some people call them energies. I don't really like the word energy because it's loaded, but archetypes, like in the Jungian sense, like this pattern of being that things fall into. So you have this masculine archetype, this Shiva archetype that is like steady and steady and solid and just kind of goes forward. And then you have this like Shakti archetype or this feminine archetype. We all have both of these in us, different proportions maybe. Men might have more of that Shiva masculine archetype versus the feminine, but um, but everybody has these things, and men predominantly have been told through society to really dismiss or tamp down that expressive, intuitive nature that's within us, that vulnerable part of us that might be described as more Shakti, might be described as more, you know, divine feminine. We've been told to kind of like tamp that down. And what we do in the retreats, for example, is we give permission, uh, and it's permission. We're not like telling people to do like you got to be more vulnerable. That comes naturally from having a space where vulnerability is allowed, where feelings are allowed, expression is allowed, and where the facilitators can kind of model how it is to be in that open-hearted sort of more divine feminine way, also honoring at the same time our capacity as men to you know go out and be very focused and very not very very kind of rigid in terms of task oriented. And you're talking about the differences between men and women. Women, on the other hand, in general, right? So there are the most masculine woman is going to be much more masculine than the least masculine man, right? So these are variances. But women, on the other hand, are much more expressive. They're more relational. They're thinking about relations and things like that. They're better at multitasking. They're more risk averse than men, by and large, on average. If you took 1,000 women and compared them to 1,000 men and took the averages on these capacities, you see that there's a difference. But it does cause us to see the world differently through the lens of your average man versus the lens of your average woman. And this causes a lot of misunderstanding. She did this because, like, what is she doing? She's like all over the place. She's thinking about all these things. She's scattered, whatnot. That might be a criticism that a man might find for their partner that through the lens that we're looking at might seem that way, but really she's managing all this stuff that we as men don't have the capacity to, and vice versa. She might be thinking, this guy's not like, he's not engaged. He's very focused. He's doing his work or playing a video game or whatever it might be. Hopefully it's something that's useful to the relationship, to the family, but he's like very focused. He's, you know, withdraws, doesn't know how to like engage emotionally, all this kind of stuff. And from her side, it looks like we're crazy, us men. So understanding how we're looking at the world differently and engaging and working with these different frames of reference. If I was talking to a child, for example, I wouldn't talk to them in adult language, right? I change it. Or an older person, I wouldn't speak as quickly as I might be speaking with you, right? We always modify our language based on the person that we're speaking with. If you're trying to be an effective communicator and be in the world effectively with regards to understanding other people. So if we understand that if we as men understand that women see the world slightly differently, and we understand that and can engage with that difference and accept, not just accept that difference, but really appreciate that difference, because it adds a lot of value to the world, and vice versa. If women can kind of approach us in the understanding that there's some things that we're going to struggle to do, but that we are all trying, and we're all trying to do our best, and we're trying to engage and be empathetic with one another. I think we will be more effective. We are more effective. I mean, we get feedback right away from the relationships, in people's relationships when they go back home and they're like, "Oh my goodness, I approached my wife in this way, more vulnerable, talking about my internal world, and she's like, oh my goodness, who are you? This is amazing. I understand what's going on inside you," and vice versa. You know, her understanding that our kind of mission in the world is to is to support them so that they can be feel expressed. And just that different way of relating to one another can be so healing and so beautiful.
I like that you mentioned permission because there's a time where earlier on in my relationships when I was trying to figure it all out, because Michael, you probably seen this or maybe you've experienced this where our 20s we think we know everything as men and we know very little. So I had to understand the power of permission from my own perspective, but also the permission to maybe be vulnerable in a relationship, the permission to open up, the permission to express myself, the permission to accept feedback. When you talked and you shared about permission, is this permission that men have to obtain for themselves, or is this permission that men have to obtain for themselves, or maybe both?
um I think society, we have an assumption that society doesn't allow for this permission, doesn't allow for expression of our internal worlds. I think that that's a false uh I think that's false. I think when we go out and engage in the world in this more vulnerable, open state, that it is actually well received in the world. But it's almost like an illusion where, because of cultural norms that have been expressed, we tamp down that expressive nature as men, that our expressive selves, our feeling nature, like what's going on internally with us, under the expectation that that is the way to be, right? And what I've noticed, especially, men will come to a retreat and they'll be in this environment where they now have permission, like explicit permission to talk about what's going on. And we start every retreat with an intention ceremony and a gratitude ceremony, where these guys are actually saying, like right out of the gates, like right after we eat dinner, um, have some candles burning, and there's like a little experience we have, a ceremony really, where we start talking about all these things in our lives that we're grateful for. And for many guys, they haven't actually named it out loud, and there's oftentimes a lot of tears, and that sets the tone. Like, hey, this is a place where we can express our gratitude versus keeping it inside and kind of bottling up. Um, and I think when they come out of the retreat and they've spent the days and in the community that we've created, being able to express these things, the gratitude, when things are hard, they can express, I'm sad about this, or frustrated with this, or whatever, can really express it and connect with the feelings and express it. They go out into the world, and now they start testing the waters, and they see, wow, I actually expressed some gratitude for somebody in a way that I wouldn't have before, and I was received very well. I got something back from them, because they then, by me being vulnerable and expressive and showing myself in that way, I implicitly give permission to the other to respond to me from that same place. And all of a sudden, the relationships, not right away, but through this practice, because it's still sensitive to go out into the world and do it with people you're not familiar with, that you haven't gotten the explicit permission for. All of a sudden, like, wow, my friendship relationships are better. People at work start saying, like, wow, something happened to you. They might not know that they went on a retreat. Oftentimes they don't know. They say, well, did you do something? Your energy is different. You're much more chill. You're much more relaxed. Like, you seem more like free in your being. And And that's what we really want to do. And now imagine this going out in the world. So I now implicitly give permission to the people around me who have not been to a retreat to be, expressive and vulnerable around me. And then they're like, huh, that felt good. Like, huh, I tried it with this guy and I got this permission here. And then they try it. So hopefully this spreads contagiously to society at large, one person at a time through this flow. So I hope that this many degrees of separation how, of this permission that we're talking about uh, is allowed in our society because we can all be better expressed rather than having to be right or be, very rigid and all these kinds of things that we often engage in the world in that way.
When you mention society and you mention culture, men and women perspective, although they're different in how they approach things, but ultimately we want similar things, right? At the end of the day, we just want to be loved. We want to feel good. We want
Sure.
someone to value us on a physical level, spiritual level, emotional level, and a mental health level. What do you see are some of the obstacles that people face when they're trying to get through the day and make sure that they're expressing the love that they have for each other in healthy ways?
So the obstacles, um, I think oftentimes men don't quite realize what women need, or we kind of put them in the box that we are in, and vice versa. Women put men in the box that they are in, like seeing the world through. And so they give us oftentimes what they want. This is what they talk about in the love language book, for example. And this isn't about love languages, what I'm talking about, but they say like, if you're to use a love language reference, if your love language is gifts and his and the other person's love language is physical touch, the person whose love language is gift is going to be wanting to give the other person gifts, whereas the other person wants physical touch, and vice versa. The other person is being wanting to give physical touch, and there's a mismatch there. And I think understanding that for a man, right? There's quite a few research studies. I heard this blip on a channel, and it was perfectly aligned with what I teach, and so I did a little deep dive on some of the research behind it. But for man being shown appreciation in terms of a relationship, of course, this is beyond the love languages. So words of appreciation are one of the love languages, but really like appreciation for what he's done uh, is sort of a form of like respect that is earned. So whether it be the smallest thing, it feels the same for a man to be thanked for something as it is for a woman to really deeply be told that I love you. Like um, for a guy, for most guys, I'm using guy general, but this is for most guys. Um, the feeling of being useful and needed in the relationship is really, you know, very, very, very important. I am useful to this relationship. Whether you're a tool, but when you get appreciated for something that you did, it feels really, really good. And women's really want to feel trust in the relationship. Everybody wants to feel trust, but specifically trust and safety. They said, I can count on this person to take care of the things that need to be taken care of in a certain way. You see, it's a perfect match here. We get this like we get to bask in this feminine glory of someone who appreciates us, and it feels so good. It's all dopamine just firing crazy, like, oh, it feels good. I did this and I got this appreciation from my partner, and I respond by being very consistent and being a place where she can fully express herself and without fear that I'm going to get upset or not be able to handle it or withdraw. And if she can feel that, then she's going to feel safe in that relationship. And together, those two things is like a perfect match made in heaven, where you're getting that, you're basking in that appreciation, where you feel like you're useful to the world, like you're needed, and she feels like, oh, I'm safe in this situation. I don't want to make it about finances, but I'm being taken care of in a way where I can be myself, and I'm not going to be judged or ridiculed or I can say what I need to say when I have to say, and it's not going to scare him away. So it works really beautifully together.
You mentioned the love language is I was in a relationship where our love language was a mismatch. Hers was gift giving, mine was words of affirmation, which it appears a lot of men like that reassurance and that words of affirmation. And her trigger was words of affirmation because when she, in her younger years, men would just tell her kind of nonsense to maybe sleep with her or get in a relationship. Like many men and women do, right? We tell lies to get what we want at the, in relationships. So it took us a number of years, not number of years, sorry, it took us a number of months to work through that. And sometimes I look back and I wonder when you mention some of the tools that you use and some of the tools that I come into other coaches use that even though as a couple you want to work through it together, sometimes you have to realize that that person's journey has to be a solo one for the betterment of a relationship, meaning that they have to use tools that is going to help them separate from maybe what helped me. So we all arrive at the planned destination together. These retreats, will it eventually be opened up to women who have a different maybe need for the type of tools that you offer men as well?
Well, definitely going to be offered. We don't make we don't make strict judgments between men or women. You arrive how you are. So the reason we have segregated the retreats is because they're very small. So we cap them at 7 people, and we have 4 facilitators. They're very intense. They're very um, there's a lot of interfacing one on one, both amongst participants and facilitators to participants. So we keep them homogenous so that in a very small group, you're going to find like if a group of 7 straight guys, right, plus the facilitators, you're going to find a lot of commonalities because they're all kind of dealing with a similar societal framework. I'm a straight man in this relationship in this container, and I'm with another 7 straight men. We've all kind of had the same cultural programming to some extent. Of course, there's variances with families, cultures, and all that kind of stuff. But to the extent we're dealing with very similar sort of very homogenous population. So there's a relatability and a comfort so that when we are being vulnerable, so, oh, you too? Oh, you have this thing too? There's a lot of like, I, and when you're opening up that container and giving permission to be vulnerable, all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, we are struggling. We are more similar than we are different, right? And that would be true if we mixed the cohorts as well. But then, for example, women have a completely different lived experience in the world, and so by keeping a group of 7 women in there, and we have mixed cohorts, we have male facilitators and female facilitators. There's it's like, oh, okay, these are things even though they may have talked about. Now they're able to see some of the male facilitators model that vulnerability and express things about the male perspective that they might not have had permission to even engage in or ask questions. The women may not have been able to ask questions or learn like what's the internal world of a man like and how is that different from their internal world, and they can learn from that. And then then they'll see like, oh, my husband does the same thing, my husband does the same thing, and they're or my partner or whatever. And then it's like, oh, okay, but in even though I see this external behavior that my partner is having, they can then see in the facilitators, the male facilitators, like, oh, okay, but there's all this other stuff is going on inside that I'm not privy to. And then ideally when they come back to say, hey, I'd like to give you permission, my partner, my male partner, I'd like to give you permission to express yourself in these ways because I just learned, this is the hope. So we haven't done the female retreat yet, but it's being put together. I've now learned that your internal world is much more complicated than I've been given it presence for. So let's make space for that and let me give you permission to talk more about your internal world so that we can understand each other better. That would be like an example how I explain your question.
I see that being very beneficial in the way you described it because the men have a lived experience, women have a lived experience. But to your point, if they can go back and they say that, honey, this is what I learned today, or
Mm-hmm.
dear, this is what I learned today, right? Because for men specifically, I'm going to talk to the men now. That's how I think we build each other up, right? Like if I see you going through something, Michael, and then you're
Mm-hmm.
sharing it, you're like, You know what? I went through that 2 years ago. I can relate because we may not share everything that we've gone through, but once I hear you start talking about it, you'll see me nodding, be like, okay, yeah, I remember that. We're women, they'll share any and everything.
Right.
Right? Because they're more communal that way. They're more talkative that way. Like they could connect through their words. Like you ever see a group of men speak and a group of women speak. A group of women could speak and speak and speak and speak endlessly, right? Where a man it'll be Michael, then it'll be Terrain, then it'll be John, then it'll be other thing. Then we all laugh together, we pay the bill, we go home. So I really like that retreat idea, and that's something that I benefited from because I found that there's such a powerful benefit in having a community come together, especially if it's, let's say, 5 to 10 or 5 to 15 people, and you just have everyone sharing their lived experience. How powerful is a community aspect at your retreat for the men that you work with?
Well, frankly, I think that it's one of the most powerful things that we have. I mean, I've been involved in retreats for 11 years now in some capacity or another. And the typical retreat journey is I mean, really the typical one is you sign up, you go to the retreat and you leave the retreat and there's very little or no follow up afterwards. Um, you can have these challenging experiences on one of these types of retreats and build real relationships with these people and feel like, oh my goodness, I'm going to know this person forever, um, because we've gone through this, but then it slips off. What Men of Integrity Universal Awareness Fellowship have done is we set up a post retreat container that allows for connection amongst both the retreat participants in each individual cohort, as well as all the people who have gone through the retreat experience. We keep them connected in some form or fashion, um, in terms of having a community where this permission that we were talking about is enabled and allowed continuously, so that it continues on. So if 6 months after a retreat, you know someone's struggling with something and needs a space where they can express themselves in a way that they know is explicitly and implicitly allowed, permission wise, we have that space post retreat, months, years. We've had people in the community now for as long as 5 years, that are engaged, with this, opportunity to be connected to folks who have, quote, drank the Kool-Aid of being able to express themselves in this way and permission to be this way. And so we allow for that, and we have that our own community. Lots of times folks come to a retreat and they're coming from, let's say one of these, the middle states that are even a little more conservative in terms of these rules, for which men are, disallowed to engage in a certain way, implicitly. And so they come back to their communities and it's like, oh, okay, now I have this new way of being. I had this experience of expressing myself. Still, people are not kind of engaged in the way that feels best for me. We have that space so that they can say, okay, I want to, I need to talk about this X, Y, or Z, and I could go to the national community of Men of Integrity, uh, and so it just allows for that to continue, because otherwise, whatever experience you have, if you come back to an environment that is the same environment and you don't have the support structure post, an experience like this, things tend to come back to status quo, and we really make an effort to allow to prevent that from happening. So it's very, very important. I don't know of any other, honestly. I mean, with all the truth in my heart, I don't know of a single other retreat opportunity that places such an emphasis on continuing community after the retreat. And we think it's one of the foundational or most important aspects, that makes us so successful, because we have been very, very successful, in terms of allowing, making an impact on folks and having that impact stick, for the long term.
That's the part that I really love about the retreats. It's you spend, let's say, a week there 4 or 5 days, 7 days. But after you're going back home to your relative quote unquote own worlds, you're still connected to the brotherhood. You're
Hmm.
still being worked on when it comes to making sure that you're staying in alignment. You still have that connection to these other people. Post retreat, what are some of the in general, what are some of the tips that you would share with these men to continue maintaining what they learned from the retreat?
It's a good question. Ah, first tip, and we talked about this on the last day of the retreat in the morning breakfast, is all right. You come to a retreat, you get this like deep awareness of yourself and all the relationships around you and all this kind of stuff. When you go back, you're gonna look the same for the most part. Like the appearance is gonna change. You're not gonna have a halo on your head or anything like that. So the world is gonna still approach you with the expectations that they had before you went to the retreat. And that might be jarring, or that will be jarring because all of a sudden, like, oh, I see, I don't have to be so rigid, uptight. I don't have to be so controlling. I don't have to be so authoritarian. I don't have to be all these ways and closed off and tight. And how I have been in the past, I go into the world, no one maybe even knows that I've been to a retreat or this kind of retreat. And now I'm being approached with the same sort of dynamic and expectations that I was approached before for no bad reason, right? How would everybody in your environment coming back home know what internal alchemical changes have been made inside you, cognitive changes, ways of being changes have been inside you. So you're gonna get confronted with people addressing you and interfacing with you with the expectation that you are still the same person before, and that can be very jarring. So setting that as an expectation and allowing them the grace to understand that why would they interface with you differently just out of the gates when they don't know how your internal world has changed, and then slowly appreciating that and not let that be a resistance factor. Another thing is to slow everything down. I mean, it's good for everything to slow things down. When you're talking to people, make space to listen to them, hear what they're saying before you interject, collect your thoughts before you speak, right? If you're doing some work, slow down the pace of your work so that it's more intentional and more forthright. You're going to get more done in an hour uh, by being intentional and steady in your work, for example, than by racing from one thing to another and maybe getting some sloppy things done, some thinking. So those are two big factors: is recognize that you're going into a world that hasn't changed. And second of all, if you slow down, you'll be able to engage and see, like, rather than reacting to something in an immediate thing, you can respond by slowing down. Those would be two big things. Um, I would also say when you go back into the world after retreat, whatever you commit to make changes in your life, whether it's having a hard conversation with your wife, or whether it is starting to go back to the gym or eating healthier, or putting down some habit that doesn't serve you, whatever these changes are, to start working on them right away. After a retreat like the ones we have, there's a window of neuroplasticity where if you're going to do some habits, it's important to start setting the structure and the habits, not only of like lifestyle habits, but the habits of being, of presence, taking up a very gentle meditation practice, maybe 10 minutes a day or something. Like, start doing that immediately after the retreat. Don't wait till I got to go to all this stuff because I took 4 days off. Now I'm going to get back into the work life, and all of a sudden everything gets scrambled back again, and you go back to baseline. Is to really make these changes and take the opportunity that this neuroplastic window that you have is there post retreat, and make these changes in your life that you committed to, and really start engaging with the world in a different place right away. Don't wait. And then those changes will stick in the long term. And if you need support, of course, you can always reach out to the community.
When I first started on my healing journey, one of the most difficult things that I had to come in face to face was just what you said. I knew what I had to do on the Friday. I slept on it the Saturday and the Sunday. The Monday now, Michael, when I had to go back out into the world, two
Mhm.
things happened. One, I knew I was a different person, but to your point, Many people didn't, because how can they tell? Right? Unless I have a sign on my forehead, I am different. Right? The mark of a healed person, like the mark of Cain. And the second thing is I saw the world differently.
Mm,
And I think that was the biggest challenge for me because I saw the world differently. I saw my family differently. I saw my friends differently. So now I started to see the demons in every single person that I was
mm,
coming in contact with because I was starting to expel what I was struggling with, expel the people pleasing, expel the low self worth, expel the insecurities.
mhm,
But one thing that I had to quickly overcome was, do I want to continue down this path? New me, healthier version of me, but maybe a lonelier version of me because maybe people won't be able to come along for the journey? Or do I say the unknown is scary? I want to go back to the old terrain
mhm.
where there's more people, where my body has gotten used to the chaos. What happens from your perspective, what happens to the men who are face to face with that decision and they're looking to make a choice? How can we help them with that choice?
Well, that's a really good question. Um, my thought is, I don't know that it's a dichotomy, like you're putting it out. For me, well, let me ask you a question. That new way of seeing these people and their demons, how did that, what was your approach to them? Because I'll tell you afterwards, like my approach to them when I see people in their, to use your words, their demons and their issues. How did that change your way of relating with them, understanding this new perspective that you can see these folks that you've been in a relationship for a long time and see them from that different perspective? What was the change in you, like in relationally with them? What was your perspective?
My perspective was that there's some people that I could no longer relate to.
Mm,
That was a big one. There are some people that, to continue the analogy of demons, it was so big. They were so irritated that there was conflict. And with some people, it was borderline a physical conflict, right? Like anytime someone goes through a change and some people may be resistant to that change because you were the drinker, you're the partier on the weekends, and now you can't do that anymore. So there's a resistance. Come on, Michael, it's just one drink. Come on, Terrain, it's just one girl, right? There's that resistance, but people will eventually get over it. Some people became very irritated to the point where you think you're better than us.
mm,
You think that you're hoity-toity, to use those words, or you're bougie, or you're whatever, right?
mm,
Because it was coming from a place of shame. So some people I couldn't relate to. The majority of the people understood. They said, you know what? We love you if this is going to make you happy. We're going to celebrate you if this is going to make you happy. But a lot of those people who were in that majority, they were the quiet ones. They said it to you, and you knew it in a text or a phone call, but they
mm,
weren't there. Many of them weren't there from my perspective to champion me on publicly. Whereas the minority, they were very loud publicly. So I always felt that I was fighting it alone. So it began to make me feel disconnected from some of the people that I was supporting because their support was in the shadows. So that was
mm.
my perspective when I was going through that.
Okay. So, okay, I get that gives me a little bit more flavor. So I'll tell you from how I experienced that. There's some people that so first of all, understanding, my own transformation, my own work, the difference between the old me and the new me that you were describing. I recognize, I recognize and see that in every person around me. So that allows me to give them grace. That allows me to find compassion in them. So even if they're like just struggling with their demons, to use your word, right? And say like, oh, okay, I used to be that way, or I used to have those same demons, right? Whatever they may be. Uh, I can still have compassion for them. I don't have to hang out with them if they become toxic to me. And when you make that space, is these people that leave you leave your environment, sometimes temporarily, because if you're willing to stay true to yourself and they see, wow, he really is solid. Like he's not being poked and provoked by my lack of engaging with the new terrain, for example. Um, huh. He seems so solid. He seems not no longer malleable in this way where he's people pleasing, and he's not changing because I'm giving him crap for staying true to himself. You may provoke change in them. That might be shocking to them to see, like, wow, how resilient you are in your being. So for me, the people that were resistant, and there weren't a lot, but it gave me the opportunity to really hold them with compassion, knowing that they're dealing with their inner journey and they're on their own path. It also gave me the resilience of, like, okay, so made room. Now I don't have these toxic people in my life. Now all of a sudden my life is now filled years later, but filled with people who are also on their healing journeys. And if I was, adapted myself for the old people who weren't serving me, right, there'd be no room for the new people who now do serve the person who I am today. And so, yeah, I hear the pain of the transition of these relationships that are lost. And sometimes any relationship that's lost is always going to have some pain, even if it's frustrating. Like if you're in a love relationship with somebody and you end up getting divorced or separated or whatever, and even if you're the person initiating that breakup, there's still a part of you that at one point in time really thought that this relationship was going to happen, like we're going to get married, or this is going to be my person, and then it falls apart. There's still that state of grieving. So whether it be a love relationship or these relationships, those folks that are still on there, that are that haven't yet begun. Let's not say still on there, but haven't yet begun their healing journey, because we have not finished our healing journey either, right? So let's just acknowledge that everybody's on a path, everybody's on different places of their own personal journey. And if we give people a little more grace, we don't give people permission to be cruel or belittling to us. We hold our own presence and our own boundaries when that sort of happens. And I'm not going to talk to this person if they're going to, push me to drink alcohol when I don't want to drink alcohol, for example. It's just not people I need in my life. But by making that space, clearing that chaff, you allow for the new flowers to grow. And there'll be people that are going to be attracted to that new terrain and his healing journey, and be like, oh, this guy is, learning stuff. He's he's kind, he's gentle, he's a good listener. Um, he's engaging with me in a way that we can really engage as human beings. And all of a sudden, these people are going to just fill in your life, and then your life is going to be rich. So maybe a period of loneliness, but it's just you're just grieving that which no longer served you. You know.
I like that. You're just grieving what no longer serves you because there's a new identity. You were that partier, you were that drinker. But now you've gone to this retreat and you understand, okay, these are behaviors that's no longer serving me. So what do I want to do about it?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make a change because I've
Yeah.
identified that this identity is no longer serving me and the behaviors associated with it. So I'm going to move forward the new terrain, the new
Mm-hmm.
Michael. What role do you think that maybe guilt plays in that journey with these men?
Guilt. I know. I like to. I have something to say about guilt and shame. Guilt usually arises when it comes from an internal space. I wish I had done this differently, right? Shame usually is connected to some societal thing, like I'm guilty for something that's some societal rule, but it might not have anything to do with let's just say, like, whether you as a man prefer to be with men or women. Like a lot of gay men have this like shame around the fact that they're not, uh, you know, not the quote norm with regards to the population at large, because there's a societal thing that's connected with them. But if they want to be expressed and be happy. They're going to be with who they want to be there. Guilt is like, oh, I said I was rude to this person in the past, or let's just say, for example, and now I feel guilty that I maybe came on too strong to them in a harsh way or something. Like now I'm guilty because I'm using my own internal compass to this, and it allows me to do something differently. So that in the future, or make an apology or whatever. I think guilt is useful, but it's not useful to like stew in guilt. All emotions are important and useful, but we want to use the information the emotion tells us, right? If I'm guilty for something I did, it gives me the opportunity to make amends or to behave differently in the future, right? Shame, on the other hand, and you didn't ask about shame, but I think it's important whenever we talk about guilt to be talking about shame because it has a similar flavor, but it's shaming you can't do anything about. If you're, if you have, usually it's connected with some kind of, a lot of shame has to do with to use as sexual analogies is the easiest thing. But if you're feeling shame about the fact that you're a man and you prefer to be in the company, you have a relationship with other men, you can't get rid of that because it's society that's telling you that's wrong. It's nothing wrong with you internally, right? And so shame can't be escaped so easily because you need to change society, or you need to change your preference in this example we're using, which can't be changed because this is the way you are. So those are two different things, and yeah, I'm not a big fan of shame. I think guilt that is allowed to used so that we can be better. Like, oh, I should have done this differently. I can now make amends. I can apologize to somebody. Shouldn't have been so strong with you the other day, or whatever it was. Um, so we can behave differently. It's more useful, but again, you don't want to be guilty all the time either. That's not a good feeling. So as long as you can engage to use that information as something that's useful to you, so that you can behave betterly in the world in a way that's more in line with who you are at core, I think it's good.
Michael, let me ask you one final question before I let you go today. And this question is, I want to give you three wishes. What are three things you want men to know about the impact of this retreat and why?
Three things. I want people to know. I mean, I want men to know that there is a way of looking at the world that oftentimes is very hard to get to without the use of an expanded state, sort of like a real intense kind of like place to see yourself in the world that is not colored by all the crazy stuff, and that there is a space for you at one of our retreats. I want to let them know that no matter how that every I want to let them know that everything is temporary, right? If you think that if you think you can't get through this part of your life, that this is realize a retreat like this helps you put in perspective that you've already gotten through so many challenges in your life. You'll get through this now, and now you can, yeah, you can get through this now. So every moment by moment is might feel like so, the world is terrible, or like you're having a hard time, or things are not working out. But you will